tiger roar, run for the door, cause if you are poor, you'll be eaten for sure. And that's how I know you're a hard taste and that's how I know that you're a hard taste and if you can't the tiger roar, I want more. Inflation rate in the world, the cost of a run-down house is absurd. System than the age for the low income wage. I'm standing one who's locked in a cage. And the poor rich kids can't afford a place to live, even if they have good jobs or being robbed. The brothers winners on the last they're from in the league of greed, and they don't even need for the feed. It's a sin. But it's the nature of the beast that the home of final peace. Your greed is going to leave you soulless.
Okay, folks, we'll be kicking off in about 10 minutes if you can be slightly patient. Thank you.
No, it's gone now.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Everybody across the road, do you want to come over? Please, if you're here for the August protest, or rally, should I say?
We are the resistance.
So we'll just wait on you then, because we're going to grab the 3 o'clock bus and come down there. There's no point, right? No, I'll be out of here. Yeah, I was thinking that because we were on the way over there, and I said, let me just pass around the corner, see how big.
Well, obviously we don't have the numbers we desired today, but don't let that defeat us. We have to continue on what we're doing by sharing all the content that we share online. Yellow Vest Ireland is on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, TikTok, various other platforms, but we share content there every day, and the only way to get the information out of what's really going on in Ireland is to log into them platforms and share the content out as much as you can. Anyway, we have a few speakers today. Our first speaker here is Michael Leahy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I repeat what Mark says about trying to share our presence here, because there's no doubt whatsoever that all of our hits are being reduced by the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and so on and so forth, which means they're terrified of us, which is a good thing. I've no doubt that the Irish people are beginning to wake up to what's going on. People that we would call normies are even beginning to get very concerned about things, and I certainly find that in the meetings which I attend. This is the 100th anniversary, approximately, of the foundation of our state. And that's a very important celebration in our history. But we have to ask ourselves as Irish people why it is that 100 years after we established this state, and after all the prosperity and froth of the Celtic Tiger years, that there will be people in this country during this coming winter who will have to make a choice between eating and heating in order to stay alive. It is not okay that elderly people are forced to go out on public transport during the day because they cannot afford to keep warm. It is not okay that Irish people are not able to live in their own country and are forced abroad to seek a decent life, at the same time as the government is actively pursuing an open door policy of importing very questionable refugees into our country without making suitable provision for their housing or their welfare. How is it a part of building back better that we face increased restrictions of movement, inflated oil prices, pressure on us to eat insects while we export our beef, reduced healthcare, and the fact that housing has now become unaffordable for our young people? We have to stand in solidarity with ordinary people, particularly older people who have given their lives to this country and now find that they are not able to live here and not able to access proper health care. The spectre of inflation, officially at 9%, but we all know from the facts that we face that it is much higher, threatens to wipe out the savings and the welfare of all of us, while our elites hoover up our property, our businesses, our jobs and our living standards. The entire policy of the European Union for the past 30 years has been to keep inflation down. This policy has now been spectacularly reversed, and we need to ask why this has happened. I want to propose 3 reasons. The first and most obvious one is the disastrous policy pursued in the main by the Green Party to attack energy prices and to deliberately make energy unaffordable in an effort to reduce carbon emissions. The policies that we have adopted are aiming for an impossibly difficult target of reducing energy emissions by 50% in the space of 8 years will have the effect of devastating our economy, hugely inflating food prices, and inflating the cost of everything on which energy depends, which is practically everything. This policy is being pursued by people who demand that we accept their nonsense junk science about global warming as being fact. The high priests of the Green Party and Sinn Féin, who trumpet every warm day as a social catastrophe. Well, you know what? I enjoy a few days of warm weather that we get every year. I enjoy my barbecues and my beer, and I'm not going to let that bunch of creeps take them from me, okay? And I'm not going to let them make me feel guilty about it. The entire purpose of the Green Agenda has been set up deliberately by an elite band of globalists who want to use the so-called emergency. Why is it always an emergency? A health emergency, or a climate emergency, or an oil emergency? As a justification for seizing property, for impoverishing the population, for destroying agriculture and food production, and, as socialism always does, for destroying and undermining the stability of society. These people have now become dangerous in that they represent a direct threat to the lives and welfare of every one of us. The deliberate destruction of the agricultural sector by unreasonable demands for reduction in energy usage, the culling of cattle, the herd, and forcing us to change our diet to eating factory-produced food and insects will of course have a catastrophic effect on food prices, the primary index of inflation, as well as making the lives of ordinary people more difficult. Perhaps that's what they really want. I don't know, I sometimes wonder. The second reason for the cost of living crisis is the irresponsible decision of the Irish government to open the borders of this country to an unlimited number of Ukrainian refugees. A huge proportion of whom have no connection whatsoever with Ukraine, without any limit, while the western part of Ukraine is perfectly safe and is filled with hotels looking for business. The Ukrainian war is essentially a border dispute in which Ireland should have no hand, act or part. It has been fomented by American and European interference in that country over the past 8 years, and it has been persistently warned about by Russia, which has repeatedly stated over the past 8 years that it would not tolerate NATO incursion up against their borders. The response of Europe has been a disastrous sanctions policy, which has done more harm to us than it would ever do to Russia. The third reason for inflation is the lack of a sound money policy within the European Union since 2008, when money was printed in order to cover the series of banking collapses which commenced in that year. This lack of sound money policy has been exacerbated by the utterly ruinous and counterproductive and in fact destructive policies enacted during the lockdowns. And I want to point out that our party, the Irish Freedom Party, was the first party to ask for an end for the lockdowns and the first one to warn 2 years ago that what they were doing would lead to massive inflation. And we're seeing that playing out as we speak at the moment. At 9% inflation, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's much higher. In respect to the vaccines, a recent United Kingdom study has found that all-cause mortality is lower in every age cohort among people who did not receive the vaccine than among those who did. We're going to need an accounting for this. We are going to need an accounting for this. And there's another anniversary coming up at the moment. I think today is the 75th anniversary of the first judgments in the Nuremberg trials. Well, you know, I think we're going to need a new Nuremberg trial, because I have no doubt that many of the people in the so-called medical profession who did what they did knew what they were doing and knew what the consequences would be. Now, whether the government will advise them or not, it doesn't matter. You cannot abrogate the responsibilities of government to bureaucrats, and if you do so, you must take responsibility. We need these people to be held accountable, because if they're not, they'll do it again. We have to bring this madness to an end. You cannot close down an economy for 2 years and print funny money and expect that there will not be an inflationary result. the only policies which our government seem to adopt in its drive to tackle inflation is to print more money, to engage in a foolhardy effort to control prices and to attempt to buy off sectors of the economy. There are two indicators that you will get of an oncoming collapse of the economy. The first is price and wage controls. And you know that's coming when they deny it's going to happen. They're now denying that they're going to do this, but at the same time they're attempting to control energy prices and attempting to control petrol prices. That will not work to curb inflation. If you want to control inflation, I want to put forward three policies which may work. Number one, an immediate end to all carbon taxes and an abandonment of the devastating policies of limiting carbon emissions. If that means withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords, then that's what we should immediately do. We in Ireland must begin to look to our own interests, and we must stop being party-wise or poster-wise for the European Union. Ireland is disproportionately affected by the crackpot ideology of global warming, and our government must begin to work on behalf of the Irish people, and not on impoverish the entire world and wreck the system of food production. Number two, an immediate end to uncontrolled and unvetted and unconscionable immigration, which is driving the price of housing and accommodation beyond the reach of ordinary Irish people, and will devastate our social welfare system and could only lead to a massive increase in our national debt and to massive social disruption. There is a role for immigration in society, but it must be based on the needs of the welcoming society and not of the obsessive virtue signalling of the crazed bureaucrats of Brussels. Number three, an immediate end to the European Union sanctions against Russia, and if necessary, a withdrawal of Ireland for participation in those sanctions. The only countries which are damaged by those sanctions are the countries of Europe. The Russian economy has been immeasurably strengthened by the increase in the price of oil which this has caused. Russia is the natural hinterland of Europe, and by engaging in this reckless policy of sanctions against it, we have driven our natural hinterland into the arms of China and India. We need Russia to a far greater extent than they need us, and it is becoming obvious that they have called our sanctions bluff, and we need to realise that. One thing about Putin, he doesn't bluff, and he knows when people are bluffing. You don't bluff against the Russian chess master, and if you want your bluff called, he'll do it for you. And we're going to find out the hard way what the consequences that will be. The best decision that Britain ever made was pulling out of the European Union. Every policy that the European Union has adopted in past years relating to climate change, relating to the war against Russia, relating to the horrible agenda of transgender, and relating to an effective policy of mass migration are policies which are undermining the stability of Europe and will eventually lead to social collapse unless we're stopped and stopped soon. You sometimes have to wonder if that kind of civil unrest and social collapse isn't precisely what our government parties are aiming for. We may not be able to effect change in the policies of Europe, but we must look to our own interests. And if that means negotiating withdrawals from the European Union, then now that those policies of that union are proving to be so damaging to our interests, then I say now is the time to effect that withdrawal. I want to congratulate Yellow Vests again for the re-emergence of their rallies. Yes, our numbers are small, but you know I have a funny feeling that as this winter proceeds, these rallies are going to become a lot bigger. Because there's going to be a lot more people who finally realise what is going on, and they're going to see what's happening, and they're going to be on the streets, and we're going to be here to welcome them. We must also face the possibility that in the very near future, meetings such as this may no longer be possible, and that the people who address issues such as immigration and withdrawal from the European Union may find themselves criminalised. In the teeth of a rising crime rate, the main interest of our Minister for Justice is in figuring out ways of silencing the opposition by the proposed hate speech legislation, whose only purpose is the destruction of the right of free assembly and the destruction of the right of free speech, so that it will prevent us from being able to have meetings like this if we let them get away with it. I therefore want to announce that on Saturday, the 10th of September, the Irish Freedom Party, which I chair, is going to organise a rally for protection of freedom of speech. That will be held outside All Air at 2:30, Saturday, the 10th of September, outside All Air in the Tricolours Street entrance. Please come along to that. This is the most critical issue that we face, because if they destroy free speech, there is no way of protecting our other freedoms. Free speech is the primary right of every freeborn citizen, and we cannot allow them to take that away. And if you read the hate speech legislation, it is aimed specifically at enabling people to shut opposition down and to shut what they call offensive speech down. Well, if you're not prepared to take offence, you shouldn't be in the public square. We must make it clear to the government and the false opposition that we will hold them to account for the damage they have caused. Every day in the teeth of real emergencies which we face, we read of some new crackpot policy, some new failure which is presented as if it is somebody else's fault. If the government wants to declare war on the interests of the Irish people, then they should realise that the Irish people have not even begun to fight back yet. I suspect we may be in for a long winter of discontent, and I would urge all of you to rally around those who stand by freedom, who stand by justice, and who stand by the nation of Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I'd like to thank you all for coming here today, but there's an awful lot of people that know exactly what's going on and exactly what's coming down the line, but yet they still refuse to make or take action, and they're sitting on the fence. It's time for each and every one of you to get off the fence and make a difference and stand out for everybody else. I mean, what are we going to say to our children in years to come? That we sat at home and we let other people try to save our country? Look, time for sitting on the fence, as I said, is over. There's a lot of people that think that Sinn Féin, people for profit and all them other controlled opposition parties are going to save them. Not going to happen. They're in bed with the rest of them. So it's up to us to make a difference. Anyway, Barry Keane is up next. He's going to speak about the importance of cash in our communities. Barry.
Small lad. Hello everybody, my name is Barry Keane from Dundalk, and I'm just going to touch on the importance of cash in our society. When we look at anybody like any of the local shops that we head around to, if we don't have cash and we don't have a card, we're screwed. Once they bring us all into digital, you know, they can control exactly what you spend your money on. First time up, so we're pretty nervous, but it's good to see everybody out. We've been at a few protests before, and the numbers have only been a quarter of this size. So as we can see, we are growing. We know the pressure the government are putting on us, and if we turn away from cash, we need to push that. Every time we use cash, somebody else has to use that cash. So we're promoting cash by using cash. And in our communities, when we look at our bakeries, if you want to tip somebody, if you have to tip somebody with your card, it's not going to happen. It has to go through the business. The business has to give it back to the employee, and they have to pay their tax on your tip. It's going to stop people from tipping people, and it's going to bring our society down. As in, you don't have to appreciate anybody who is servicing you or helping you, whether it's a waiter, whether it's a barman. You're not going to be able to say thank you. Well, you can say it from your mouth, but a fiver always helps a barman at the end of the night. If he has to pay 30-40% on that, the customer is not going to give the tip because they don't want to pay the tax. It's simple. It's up to us to keep using cash. At the end of the week, when we get our wages, ask our employer to pay us in cash. Don't ask for the money to come into our bank account and then take it out. Ask for our business to pay in cash. If we look through any of the cash groups around Ireland that have sprung up over the last few months, you'll see bakeries and all of these companies that are paying thousands just for the customers to tap. For those businesses to have 2 or 3 extra grand at the end of the year will make a difference. It'll probably keep them open for a few more months. It might not be the result that they need, but at least they'll be able to stay open. It's important that we don't go digital because it's very easy to commit fraud when it's digital. They say that cash is very easy to counterfeit. It's actually very hard. There's materials in a note that nobody can just make a banknote. It's easier to stick a few digits on someone's account in a bank. And when we look at all these buildings down here that are all owned by banks, who rob billions off all of us people every single month, and all they have to do is pay a small wee fee, a small wee fine, They get to keep the rest of the money. Well, I'll tell you, if I robbed a bank 20 years ago and they found me today, I'd have to return everything and I'd be behind bars for the rest of my life. They get away with all of it. I don't have a whole lot to say, but I do have to say that cash is the most important thing we have. It's legal tender. If a shop doesn't want to take cash off you, walk out the door and tell them thank you very much because you were supposed to accept that. If they'd stop taking cash off us, they can control us. They can tell us what to buy, when to buy, and if you want a steak tomorrow, you're not going to have it because you had one last week. That's kind of all I want to say. I just want to say every time you use cash, somebody has to use it again. So it's a knock-on effect. Keep using it, and then the rain will go away.
Thanks, Marty. There's no reason why we can't have another 40,000 out in the streets again like we did last year. But as I said, it can't be left in the hands of the few. It's up to each and every one of us to keep on pushing as hard as you can. There's no doubt in my mind that will happen. Maybe after the winter, when people finally realise what the government's been up to and what they have planned next. So, for the next protest, keep on pushing, look at our stuff online and keep on sharing. The next person I have to speak is Pat Green. He's going to tell you a little bit about direct democracy, or otherwise known as citizens initiated referenda.
Before I go on to direct democracy and what citizens initiated referenda is, the first thing you have to understand is, where does authority come from? Who has authority? God knows we're told by the authority that they seem to have the power. But when you think about how it is structured, how the parliamentary systems are structured, you don't have power elites who control us, you have parasites. Those parasites control the maggots that are in the EU Commission. The maggots then tell the worms in the EU Parliament what they have to do. And the worms then tell the snakes in Dáil Éireann what they have to do. And then the snakes in Dáil Éireann tell the civil servants to force us what they want to do. But you have to understand that authority does not come from them, it comes from us. When you examine the structure of authority, it starts with the universe, or God, or whatever it is you wish to talk about. I prefer the word God. Below God comes nature. So you've God, nature, man. No, I did not mention male or female, because every female here is of man. Nature, man. Families. Below families is the nation. Then the nation come together and create a constitution. The constitution in turn creates the state. The state in turn creates policy. Policy is then enforced on the citizen. So if anybody here thought being an Irish citizen was something to be proud of, think again. Below the citizen, you have residents. Those are people who come here for a long period of time and are given the same privileges that we have. Privileges, not rights. Below those, you have guests. And guests are holiday seekers. They come here, they're guests in our nation, and they go home. The residents are given very privileges, and eventually they go home. But then there's citizens. We think, and we're led to think. We're allowed to assume and presume. That's allowed in the courts, by the way. So you're allowed to assume, presume that you have rights. You don't have rights as a citizen. You have obligations and privileges. I'll ask the question, how many people here own an Irish passport? None of you actually own it. Because if you read it, in the top right-hand corner of the back page, it says, it remains the property of the Minister for Foreign Affairs. It's his, not yours. Who here has an Irish driver's license. Who owns an Irish driver's license? No, you don't. It's not yours, it's theirs. It's a privilege given to you that can be withdrawn at any point in time. Furthermore, just on the driver's license, take out your phone, turn on the torch, shine it through, and you'll see there's a microchip with an antenna in your driver's license. Actually, not your driver's license, theirs. But you have to understand where authority comes from. It comes from man. Where would you rather be in the leg of, or the rung of the ladder of authority? The citizen or man? I would prefer to be man. That is where we have rights, our inalienable rights, and that's where we need to focus. The only way we can control this state is that we as citizens come together in order to vote these snakes out of existence. But then we need to change the system. We need to reimagine our democracy. We need to redesign our democracy. And then we need to rebuild our democracy. Because right now, the parasites that run the maggots, that run the worms, that run the snakes, are feeding off the detritus of a dead body of democracy. And we need to change that. The people who are suffering from mica, sorry, I shouldn't use the word suffering, suffering is voluntary. The people who are inflicted with the pain of mica, their houses crumbling, they don't know if they're going to be crushed at a moment's notice. They were turned over by the system. They need to be here to help change the system. The fishermen need to be here to change the system because they're getting screwed. But they don't see the connection between fishing and mica. Nor do they see the connection between fishermen being screwed over, mica being screwed over. The pylon groups, they should be here because they're being screwed over. Go from that and you look at every little pressure group around the country who are told to go have sex while traveling by this system. Because that's what the system is there for, is to treat you like dogs. You can either stand up and count yourself among man, or you can stay on your knees, stay there begging for the crumbs off the table, begging for the crumbs that the parasites might throw your way. They're coming after your lands, they're coming after your farms, they're coming after your houses. The 39th Amendment that's coming down the road is called a right to housing. We already have that right. It's an inalienable right to have a roof over your head. But we don't exercise it. But then we have the lefties in government coming out with a right to housing. Sounds great. And what have you gone after that? Does Fianna Fáil say anything against it? No. Fine Gael? No. Labour? No. Sinn Féin? Right. So what have you got? You have a planned planned opposition, sitting on the sidelines so they can blame the lefties for the government coming after your property. The government are going to delimit their access to our property. That's the wording. Every resident will be entitled to a house. Remember where resident is on the hierarchy of authority. Down here. You come in off the boat, you're here a wet day, yeah, there's a house. But where are they going to get them from? To delimit the right to property gives unlimited access to your property by the state. Where's the state? In here. Where's the man? Up here. You're down here as a citizen, do as you're told. You have obligations and privileges. Your obligation is to do as you're told, and then you get your privileges in return. We have inalienable rights to a roof over our head already. We don't need any more. So what are they trying to do? What's the actual reason for it? Well, you go to America, you see overtopping over there, same thing, coming after the land. You go to Canada, oh, same thing. Denmark, Same thing, the Netherlands. At least they're putting up a fight. They're trying to stop them from stealing their land, but they're called conspiracy theorists. Yes, here's one for you. If anybody says to you you're a conspiracy theorist, tell them it's just a sign of ignorance to use a word that stops all debate and reason. So make sure that is what you say to them. So we have to come together as Irish, as man. The people who want to be part of this nation, they need to come with us. Because we'll be on this journey for the rest of our lives. Our children will be here, and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We cannot give this state any more power to destroy our families. Where are the families? Up here. Where's the state? Down here. They want you below them. Families have a special place in the Irish Constitution, but nobody bothers reading it. So if we come up with direct democracy, or what's called citizens-initiated referenda, something we had in 1922 in that constitution. Some people don't call it a constitution, but it was there. Article 48 gave you, an individual, any one of you, could go down to your local authority, start a referendum, or at least start a petition for a referendum. If you collect 70,000 signatures in 18 months across the country, not patching up on O'Connell Street, then a referendum is called. You were the referendum, the state doesn't. Man is here, state is here. So you were that referendum. You get that referendum called, and when the decision is made by the people, not by the state, by the people, then they are duty bound and legally bound to carry out the wishes of the people. So when you're in a situation where you've got unlimited access to our country from people abroad who by and large don't need it, I've no issues and nobody has an issue where somebody's life is threatened and they need sanctuary. Any normal being would help another being to do that. Well, what I have a problem with is a planned destruction of our nation by the state and by the parasites who control the maggots and the rest of it. Those ideas are their ideas, and what they want to do is dilute our nation to such a state that we have no nation. And they're succeeding. The people coming here are pawns in a geopolitical war. The only way we can stop it is through direct democracy, is the use of citizens-initiated referenda. But we cannot get those, or that type of democracy, the reimagined democracy, the redesigned democracy, the rebuilt democracy. We cannot get that without the smaller groups coming together and voting for people who want direct democracy, voting for people who want citizens-initiated referendum, who want the ability to keep the people in Dáil Éireann accountable on a day-to-day basis. Not coming out once every 5 years, gives you a tick now, trot on, good lad. Don't come out for another 5 years, I'll let you know. I'll give you a bit of notice, 2 weeks. That's how they treat us. If we don't change this system, we have committed our children to a prison planet. We have committed our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, to servitude. Serfdom is back. It has all the trappings of freedom, with no freedom. It is up to us here today to reach out and speak to the other groups and say, get here. Because if you don't get here and don't show what we are about, You will be rolled over as the Micah people have been rolled over. You will be rolled over as all the other groupings are rolled over. Wheelchair access. Yeah, right. Who cares? Less money for the parasites if you start spending money on people who have disabilities. You've got mental issues off the scale. No money for that, but Jesus, plenty of money for bombs. The parasites control the financial system. We need to control the parasites. And the only way we can do that is, again, I repeat it, citizens-initiated referendum. You don't get that through your head. Go home, go into the corner, kneel down, put your head between your legs and kiss your arse goodbye. Because that is exactly what's been done to us. I leave it at that, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Matt Green, thanks very much. Just like to touch back on what Michael spoke about earlier. Today is the 75th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. These are crimes against humanity, which are happening again. We've seen it over the last 2 years. It's up to us to support this. And on the Yellow Vest Ireland page, we have a Rumble account now, where over the last week and a half, I put up over 14, 15 interviews with doctors. On August the 8th, more than 20 doctors from America arrived in Ireland to talk about the proclamation for the health of the children, and it was passed on the 9th, the day after the event. All of these videos are online, and it shows how 16,000 doctors who are in this organisation were cast out, how the media overturned what they were saying and made them out to be the villain. And it's up to us to support these doctors. It's up to us to share these stories, and it's up to us to show how they were criticised, because they're the only reason that we have proof, and we know that with this proof we will look for justice. Again, all these videos are on the Rumble. They're there for you to share, or at least watch. By watching, some of these videos are 20 minutes long. You can do one a day. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Mark's going to close us out here. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming, and have a good day. Enjoy that sun. See, it's not raining this time.
Thanks, Barry. Listen, if anybody is serious about helping us, we've an notepad here. You come up and give us your name, your number, your email address. We'll be able to send details of the next protests and days of action directly to you. Listen, thanks very much for coming again, and a special thanks to all the speakers and sound man Rory. See you the next time. Thanks very much. Thank you.